Welcome on Texas football. Time for State of the Program, our weekly program where we take a 30,000-foot view of the Texas Longhorns. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Gerry Hamilton and CJ Vogel of On Texas Football. Thank you to our sponsor, Adam Lowy of the Lowy Law Firm. We'll talk about him a little bit later in the show as well. All right, guys, I tell you what, we've got a lot of stuff going on right now in Longhorn land, whether it's the team, whether it's recruiting. Texas on the cusp of a potential playoff run at 9-1 with Kentucky coming to town. We've got recruiting going on because Steve Sarkisian is doing Steve Sarkisian things and getting last-minute visits to campus of elite players. We need to talk about that. Before we get going anywhere right now, though, let's talk about Texas and what they've got ahead of it this week against Kentucky. Point out one thing that y'all are looking for in this game from the Longhorns. Here is mine. I want Texas to score at least 20 to 24 points against a defense that is going to mix in a three high. They're going to mix in, and they've got talent. The one thing about Kentucky, they've reasonably kept teams in check on offense. I'm looking for a solid, I don't need a spectacular performance from Quinn Ewers. I'm looking for a solid performance from Ewers and the offense as a whole. Gerry, I'll let you go first. What are you looking for?
4 sacks on defense for me. Look, last week Arkansas's right tackle had issues in pass pro. I think Kentucky's got issues in pass pro. They're giving up 27 sacks in 10 games, and 2 of those games are against Murray State and Southern Miss, right? Teams that shouldn't be sacking them. So those numbers are probably higher against P4 opponents. But I want this Texas team to get after Vandegrift because he has turned it over. Kentucky has had issues protecting the quarterback this year in pass pro. And that's playing a condensed style of football, right? That's trying to shorten a possession game. They've still given up 27 sacks. I want to see Barron Sorrell, Colin Simmons, Trey Moore, Alfred Collins, Vernon Burton from the interior. I want Anthony Hill. I want to see Texas get 4 sacks Saturday, because if they put a lot of pressure on this Kentucky offensive line, I have a hard time seeing Kentucky score points unless it's busted plays or Barron Brown takes back a kick.
Gerry, you mentioned that, and I think it's a great segue, actually, in some respects, in that, and that's also something you said last week, and that's success on first down on defense as well, because then you can actually get after the passer. What about you, CJ? What is your one thing you're really looking for this weekend?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what Kentucky shows up, right? You know, you hold Ole Miss to 17, you hold Georgia to 13, you hold Vanderbilt to 20, and then you look at South Carolina with 31, Tennessee, a 10-point victory, Florida put up about 48, right? You know, so there's different levels of Kentucky that we've seen this year. What are they fighting for right now? I want to see a quick start, and I think that there was glimpses of that in Fayetteville against Arkansas, right? The first 2 drives didn't go your way, but you were able to punch in on your third possession. That's kind of been the theme for Texas offensively this year. Is this finally the game where you see a first possession, opening possession drive end up in the end zone? I think that would go a long way against a defense that I think is really, really talented with NFL guys at all 3 levels. So if that's the case and you're continually allowing teams to fight from behind, that plays right into the hands of Texas. That plays into the 4 sack number. That secondary is the strength right now. I'd love to see a quick start by the Texas offense, and that's 10 to 14 points in the first quarter. That would be a really positive note for me.
Yeah, that'll put them, to my point too, that'll play into Gerry's piece just as well. They're going to have to throw the football at some point because the one thing you don't necessarily want to do, you don't want to give a team like Kentucky on the road life in the second half and a ability to just drain the clock with the run game.
Right.
Y'all's 2 points really brings it out. Mine is, I want to go back to this. People are saying, oh, well, Quinn Ewers has to be spectacular for Texas to win a national championship. Maybe so. But the goal on Saturday is not to win the national championship. It's to beat Kentucky. Quinn Ewers has a mistake-free or error-free game, no turnovers in Texas territory, handles the ball well, that sort of thing. Texas is going to win the football game. His goal on Saturday is to be solid, not spectacular. If he's graded against that, I think that's the big piece for me. All right. The next piece we want to go over is recruiting, because that is going to occupy a lot of our time here on State of the Program. today because there's a lot to talk about as it relates to it. Before we do that, I want to say thank you to our sponsor. Each and every state of the program is brought to you by our friend Adam Lowy at the Lowy Law Firm. He and his firm have been helping injured Texans for 20-plus years. If you've been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind and think you might be due compensation, call Adam and his firm for a free, no-strings-attached consultation. Again, thank you to Adam and his group, LowyLawFirm.com. All right, Gerry and CJ, Texas has a top 5 class right now. We all know that. That's good. That's great. That's what Texas. That's the range Texas never wants to be out of under Steve Sarkisian or any coach, really. Okay, but as per usual with Sark, he's trying to put something together down the stretch here that might look a lot different and even better. On offense, if they keep Jamie French, they're basically done, with the exception of going after 5-star offensive tackle Michael Fasusi, who's scheduled to be in town this weekend for the Kentucky game. Currently committed to Oklahoma, but we'll see where that ends up. Okay, on defense is where things are still. There's a lot to shake out right now. There really is. You could go from a B+, A- type of defensive class to an A+ defensive class over the next 2 weeks. We are officially just 2 weeks from National Signing Day, by the way. Gerry, put some of the guys out there and give people a perspective of what's left on defense.
Yeah, so you start on interior defensive line, and Joseph Mbaktu, the top 2 guys they're after are in the state of Georgia. Joseph Mbaktu out of Grayson, former Florida commitment, was at Florida last weekend. Texas, Florida, Auburn, scheduled to be at Tennessee this weekend. Those are the schools. USC, meaning Southern Cal's out for him. Those are the schools. Kenny Baker's done a good job. Texas in a pretty good spot here, but we're going to let those visits play out with him, see if Georgia makes a last run. Then there's Justice Terry, the 5-star out of Manchester High in Georgia, a little bit northeast of Columbus on the way to Atlanta, closer to Columbus than Atlanta. He is a considered Georgia lean over Texas, Alabama, and Auburn, where he's scheduled to be this weekend. He's greatly going to impact class rankings because he's a 5-star who's going to decide between one of those 4 schools. All 4 of those schools are top 6 ranked teams in the class rankings nationally right now. Then at edge, it's Javion Hilson, 6'3.5", 238. A kid from Cocoa, Florida is coming down to Texas and Texas A&M. That can only happen if Texas and Texas A&M are in the SEC, by the way. So now they are together. One of the top 40, 50 players in the country. Joseph Mbaktu, top 200 guy. Then there's linebacker Kellen Wiley out of Armwood High in the Tampa area in Florida. One of the big senior risers along with Mbaktu in the country in this class. 6'3.5", 226. Texas leads Miami, headed into the Miami visit this weekend. Then you had the development with Cade Phillips. And Cade Phillips is the LSU former Texas commit, currently committed to LSU from Missouri City Hightower in the Houston area. 6'1.5", 6'2", 180-pound corner defensive back. He's coming in this weekend. So Texas has a number, and the top 50 kid in the country, a number of highly ranked guys nationally still on the board and still possibility. Oh, and then there's the really long shot, but we got to mention him, Zion Williams, the LSU defensive tackle commit out of Lufkin High. May make an official visit to Texas. I think it's over 50-50. We'll see if he actually shows up. They have a Friday playoff game in College Station. But if he shows up on campus, could that get interesting? Maybe. But all these guys we're talking about, CJ and Bobby, are all SEC high-level defensive players. And this class, and I know we're going to get into, has a number of bonus-size athletes on defense that I think are elite. Texas has a chance to put together, I believe, a defensive class, if they close out well, that would have the look of an Alabama or Georgia defensive class under Kirby Smart and Nick Saban.
Yeah, that's the goal, right? I mean, Gerry, when you set out to sign a recruiting class on defense, if you don't want your class to look like Alabama or Georgia's, I don't know what you're doing. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, I think. I want to say this because I misspoke earlier. I said Michael Fasusi, the only offensive player left. I didn't mention or neglected to mention Michael Terry out of
Right.
Alamo Heights because he's kind of a do-it-all guy.
Right.
We've been talking about him so long. He's not necessarily a recent development. Fasusi, a recent development. All right, back to the defense and what you're talking about here, Gerry and CJ. You look at guys like Josiah Sharma, Myron Charles, Elijah Bo Barnes, Jonah Williams, Caleb Chester, guys that are long, have SEC caliber or type body, and not to mention Lance Jackson, Smith Orogbo, those types of guys, right? Could this be the best if they finish with these guys, some of these guys that you're talking about, CJ and Gerry? Could this be the best defensive class Sark has ever had? Maybe. I mean, look, they've had some good defensive classes. Don't get me wrong. Anthony Hill and Manny Muhammad and Derek Williams, all in the same class, right? All in the same class. They've had some good classes like that. Is this possibly the best one of that group, CJ?
I think so, and I think it starts with the front. You know, that defensive line, that edge room right now for Texas, that's as talented an edge rushing combination that Texas has had, even with a Colin Simmons and a Zeno Umeozulu a cycle ago. But you start looking at what's on the interior and the options still available for Texas to add there, and that certainly encapsulates in my mind what an SEC defense starts with. You know, the Alabamas, the Georgias, those guys that you look at 320 pounds on the interior and say, yeah, we're in for a long day when we have to play them. That's what Texas is building right now. And then you look at the edges, and the edges to me are probably the highlight of this class, especially when you add in the factor that, hey, they're still after Javion Hilson, but Lance Jackson, Smith Orogbo, you got a guy that's going to be pushing 275, 280 with extreme length, superb athleticism, and complement him with a guy that's probably as twitchy an edge rusher as Texas has recruited, not named Colin Simmons, in 20 years. I mean, that's really impressive. And then on top of that, I mean, Gerry, you mentioned it, but just the jumbo athletes that you're going to be able to move around behind them. I think it starts with the trenches. Texas has knocked that out of the park this cycle. And then you go get game-changing jumbo athletes with great athleticism. Again, that's Jonah Williams. That's Elijah Barnes. I love Caleb Chester on the outside. It's a really, really well put together defensive class. What's the weak spot right now? All cycle it had been defensive line. Now I think you're looking at defensive line, and if things shake out in the manner of the Longhorns' direction, hey, you're looking at a strength everywhere, I would say.
Yeah, they keep Charles and Sharma and add Mbaktu. They likely go to the portal for some older players at defensive tackle. And I think it's a really, really good class. And then the edge piece, Lance Jackson, guys, may be a guy that ends up not unlike Alfred Collins and being a 3 and a 5. He can play either or based on his body type.
Yeah.
And then you add in a Hilson and or a Smith Orogbo. I get where you're going with that, Gerry. What do you think?
Yeah. So I want to read off a few names here because I just looked that up while CJ was talking, while you were talking. Let's look at the 2002 Texas deep class that was ranked number 1 in the country. Obviously, Vince Young was the number 1 player in the country, but I want to put in perspective how impressive this defensive class could be for Texas. Reminder, this class won a national championship, and there are other parts of it. Tim Crowder in a class, some other guys, but this defensive class for Texas that year, Michael Williams never really played. Larry Dibbles, role player. Dorian McCullough, 5-star corner, never materialized. Brian Pickrell was a 5-star edge who hurt shoulders and had to retire early, but was on track. Chase Pittman, really talented defensive lineman, transferred to LSU. Okay, Marco Martin, horrific knee injury in high school, was a 5-star prospect, never played much at Texas. Aaron Harris, starting middle linebacker. Then you get down to Matthew Melton was a backup safety. Marcus Myers was a backup linebacker. Brian Robeson on the show, obviously a 12-year NFL player. Aaron Ross, obviously a first-round pick. Garnett Smith played some at linebacker. Roderick Wright, Raleigh solid starter on the national championship team. Now, Bobby, you covered all those guys. This defensive class is something serious with that, a different level talent on defense if Texas signs some of these top targets left. There's more bigger jumbo athletes with SEC speed size combo in this class versus
they're more prototypical NFL players is what they are, Gerry. And I'm not trying to, I don't want to, down talk anybody, but I look at a Larry Dibbles. Larry was never 320.
Right.
In high school. He was always a 6'1", 275 guy. You know what I mean? Dorian, and by the way, a couple of those guys just makes me sad because Dorian McCullough was as talented at a cornerback, and he just couldn't make the grades at Texas. He ended up having a cup of coffee in the NFL after going several different ways in college and junior college, et cetera. Brian Pickrell was going in a great direction. They got the shoulder. You look at it, and I will say this. Aaron Harris, 4 years, 3 or 4 year starter at Texas, right? Bo Barnes is 3 inches taller and 25 pounds heavier and more athletic.
Yep.
Just to give you a sense of that. Brian Robeson. I don't know if Smith or Rogbo or Lance Jackson, any of those guys are going to have a 12-year NFL career. That's a lot to ask. But I'm telling you, the size speed combo, it's very indicative. I mean, there weren't Cade Phillips and Jonah Williams in this class type of guys on defense.
Yep.
So I hear what y'all are saying. I think that right now Texas has to focus on finishing this out. And I will also say this, I rarely think recruiting comes down to a single game. But if Texas beats Kentucky on Saturday, okay, and then goes and beats A&M in College Station, I mean, the floodgates, they're not open. They're flowing. And he's already got it to where I think they're flowing right now.
Yeah.
It's kind of getting ridiculous in that stage where, Gerry, you don't just go into Florida and Georgia and get these guys. It doesn't happen that way. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to be overstated or overly dramatic. It's one of the more impressive things I've seen. And, we talked about on Coffee and Football this morning, the idea that all those years Texas has kind of confined itself really to the state of Texas and then spot recruited other places. Well, you don't have success if you only spot recruit other places. You have to go in there whole hog, like Texas has done in Florida, like Texas has done in Georgia. You really have to recruit the state. And frankly, that's what Alabama has done in the state of Texas. That's what Georgia's done in the state of Texas. That's what Florida's done in the state of Texas and Florida State in years past.
Yeah.
They don't just cherry pick. They go in and offer the top 15 to 20 guys.
Yeah.
So now that Texas is putting the shoe on the other foot, I think you're seeing I think that what we're seeing is the results of that, in addition to joining the SEC, which was one of your first comments, Gerry. Now that has happened, that they've joined the SEC, it's made that introduction more natural and more relevant, would be a great way to put it. They're not just another out-of-state team. They're a team that plays in the best conference in the country.
And that Texas went into the SEC coming off a playoff appearance and 11 guys getting drafted.
Yep.
I mean, you couldn't have come into the SEC in a better place than Texas because they had millions of eyeballs on them up from kids in this 25 and 26 classes and their families, millions of eyeballs on Texas headed into the SEC. Oh, and then, by the way, I don't care. People can talk about the schedule all they want, but Texas is sitting here 9-1 and 3 in the college football playoff and has been ranked in the top 10 all season long. And when you're ranked in the top 10 all season long, everybody takes your phone call.
Yeah, we've talked about it going on the road when Sarkisian and the staff have a bye week. Well, the first one happened when they were number 1 in the country. The other one happened when they were number 4. To your point, Gerry, that certainly helps walking in with the Longhorn logo as well. To your point about the draft, when you start recruiting as well, hey, you just had a guy drafted at every single position a year ago. And it looks like that's going to be the case again this year with a quarterback, maybe replacing a running back. Regardless, you're going to have pieces at every single position that you could point to and say, we've had multiple guys drafted here in multiple drafts. That goes a long way as well.
Yeah, draft where they had graduates, right? Like last year, they didn't have a quarterback drafted, but they had no opportunity, nobody leaving the program that was a senior. I think that that's going to be key. The real idea here, though, that I wanted to focus on for this piece in general is the quality of defensive players.
Yeah.
This is what, to go back to it, this is what Alabama and Georgia have been recruiting for a decade almost. Or Alabama for longer, Georgia more recently. If Texas can do that and combine it with Steve Sarkisian as an offensive play caller, I mean, are you really worried? I mean, look, Georgia right now, I'll give you an example. Georgia's play caller is not what it was. Their best play caller went to the NFL. And you've seen them take a step back on offense. Some of that may be due to a couple of key players, I agree, but they've taken a step back. Now, Kalen DeBoer, maybe he brings an offensive mindset to Alabama that they can now match, but they don't have the defensive players they once did. Georgia kind of took that from them. You have a perfect storm brewing in Austin that could bring together really talented offensive scheme and players, as well as elite defensive players. I mean, in that, that's not all that makes a defense. We learned that this year as much as anything. The communication level and playing together as a team and understanding the scheme has played a vital role in this Texas defense this year being number one in the country. But if you combine all those things together, I mean, that's the blueprint, is it not? I mean, that's if you're looking back and thinking about it, what else do you want? You're going to have an offense because you got the offensive coach, you get the defensive personnel, and you got a defensive coordinator and group of defensive coaches that have proven if they have the pieces, they can put them out on the field and get it done. I mean, what else is it if it's not the blueprint?
No, that's the blueprint, and they're doing it with the right type of guys. I mean, look, Lance Jackson looks like a guy that would have played for Nick Saban. Bo Barnes looks like a guy that would have played for Saban. You look at this defensive back group, if they keep their guys, because Zealous Hicks is visiting this weekend, but teams are still coming after him as they should be because now he's reclassed to 25. There's a little more, I don't want to call it panic, but sense of urgency from those other teams because Zealous Hicks is playing the sign December 4th. But if you add Cade Phillips to that, you're sitting there with 6'3", 205, 210 with Jonah Williams at safety. Hicks is not a small kid, 6'1.5", 190-ish as a junior in high school. Cade Phillips is a 6'2", 180-pound guy. That'll probably be 190, 195 pounds with an 80-inch wingspan. Grayson Littleton is built very much like Carrington Bendham, but I mean is a 6-foot shade under 6-foot guy with good length. Caleb Chester is a 6'1.5", maybe 6'1" kid with good length. They're signing on the back end. They're signing size at safety and length at corner. At linebacker, they're signing bigger athletes and more of them. If they get Kellen Wiley to go with Bo Barnes, Jonathan Cunningham's more in the Ty Anthony Smith mold. But then up front, you mentioned Sharman Charles. If you add in Bot to, who's going to be 6'4", 310 one day, to those two guys, and Lance Jackson and a Rogbo, and if you went out for Javion Hilson, your entire defense, you could say there's 7, 8, 9 of those guys that Nick Saban would have signed at Alabama. I mean, what more you can't ask for more than that.
Yeah. All right. Guys, y'all have anything else you want to add to this state of the program before we get going here? Anything that you're thinking?
Just recruiting, and as we enter the month of December, I know that the signing period has moved up, but you've seen this Texas class come in strong and finish strong for a number of guys, right? Colton Vasek, a late flip from Oklahoma. Ty Anthony Smith, Anthony Hill, late flips from Texas A&M. Xavier Phil-Sami, late flip from Florida, right? It goes on and on and on, and it normally happens right in the week or two leading up to signing day. So to the point of all these guys remaining, all the flips still out there possible, this is right in the wheelhouse for Texas. And for the most part, you don't see guys flip out of Texas. And if that's the case, they have a guy ready to go like Aaron Butler a year ago for the Longhorns. This is the wheelhouse of recruiting right now for Sarkisian. They're great closers. It's like having Mariano Rivera and all sorts of all-star closers in the clubhouse waiting to go for the Texas recruiting staff. And so that I think that's the more encouraging, kind of final 2-week outlook for this staff is you got a lot of good pieces ready to go. You got even more waiting to join the fold. Who else can you add to make this one of the more talented, complete classes Texas has seen since Sarkisian took over. We'll see in the next 2 weeks.
I'm going to add this. Texas is going to be aggressive in the portal too.
Yeah.
So if there are opportunities to make this football team better, Texas is going to be aggressive there as well as in the high school recruiting. All right, that's going to do it for this day of the program. Longhorns have Kentucky on Saturday at 2:30. It'll be on ABC. We'll talk more about recruiting. If you want daily recruiting updates, make sure you check out ontexasfootball.com. That's ontexasfootball.com. Gerry and CJ, y'all are doing a great job covering recruiting for Longhorn fans also out there. Also, I want to say thank you to our sponsor. That is Adam Lowy over at the Lowy Law Firm. If you've been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind, reach out to Adam and his group, LowyLawFirm.com. Thanks again, Adam, for your support. All right, for Gerry Hamilton and CJ Vogel, I'm Bobby Burton. This has been State of the Program. Hook 'em.